On behalf of the Psychology Department at Wheaton College, we'd like to welcome you to the 30th Annual Scandrett Lecture, named after Dr. Ona Scandrett, who was the first chair of the Psychology Department at Wheaton. This lecture series invites distinguished leaders in the integration of psychology and Christian faith to speak to students, staff, faculty, and friends from the community on matters that are important to contemporary integration. You can read a little bit about Dr. Scandrett's history in your program, and I'd also invite you to come up and visit the Psychology Department on the mezzanine floor. We're well hidden in the Billy Graham Center. And if you walk around the mezzanine, you can actually see some photographs that Dr. Scandrett, who was an avid photographer, took, as well as a little bit more of his history. Dr. Scandrett's important legacy to the department can be summarized in his life verse from Philippians 4:8, which really speaks to the heart of our integrated mission. And it reads like this: "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." And here today to help us think about such things is Dr. Steve Sweatman. And we are really excited to have the chance to hear from someone who's so highly regarded in the field of both missions and psychology. Dr. Sweatman is president of Missions Training International in Palmer Lake, Colorado, and founder of International Personnel Consultants, one of the largest Christian consulting practices that assists organizations sending personnel overseas. Dr. Sweatman actually began his academic journey here at Wheaton College as an undergraduate, where he earned a BA in psychology in '87, remember the year, and a master's in biblical studies in 1988. Even more important, Steve met his wife, Sherry, at Wheaton in an undergrad psychology class, right? I love that part of the history. Steve then earned his PhD in clinical psychology with an emphasis in cross-cultural adaptation from Rosemead School of Psychology, and he's also an ordained minister. He currently travels the world through his work with MTI, training and debriefing servants of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I've been blessed to get to know Steve through attendance of the annual Mental Health and Missions Conference that MTI sponsors every fall. And I have this vivid memory from the conference this past fall of Steve's keynote presentation at the conference, watching a big group of Wheaton students sitting right in the front row, right on the edge of their seats, looking like they were wanting to jump up and shout, "Amen!" during the lecture. And so you're welcome to do this today if you feel so inspired, right? And if you want to jump up and say amen, we can always get a good amen from Rich Button in there.
Amen.
But I'm confident that you'll find Steve's Scandrett lecture to be equally engaging today. So I just want to open us then in a word of prayer. Lord, we magnify your name this day, our creator, our sustainer, the source of all wisdom and love. Thank you for the gift of this time we have to gather together as those called to serve your kingdom through the fields of psychology and missions. We ask for the active presence of your Spirit this day to speak through Steve, to inspire, to challenge, and to instruct. In Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. To say it's a delight to be here at Wheaton would be an understatement. Although I am having some troubles, I think I'm in a good company. I'm having some flashbacks. I was walking up the steps to the Billy Graham Center and had to stop. And I remember going, oh, I had the poor person walking up next to me because I remembered right here is where Sherry Clark broke up with me. And then I'm in Dennis's house that night going, help, I need a place to stay. My world's turned upside down. But to see faces of people that impacted me so much, Fran White, Rich Buttman, Dennis Massaro, and others of you that are out there, it's very special for me to be back here at Wheaton. It's a little bit of a mind tweak. I was used to receiving so much here at Wheaton, and now here I might have something to give. That's amazing to think about. In fact, my kids saw the announcement. They didn't know whose picture was on that little announcement, and my one son said, distinguished psychologist. Does that mean you have gray hair? Is that what that is about? I do stand before you not as someone who is a writer or a researcher or a professional speaker. But I will tell you that this subject we're going to talk about, I've given my life to. I love this subject. I believe that our Master has told us what to do and how to do it in terms of the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. And I'm excited to be with you here today. Very excited. To give you a little bit of background, my journey after Wheaton, just a real succinct going down that road. I spent time living in Israel, finishing my master's in biblical studies, thanks to Walter Elwell here, helping me do some faculty-directed study. I was the guinea pig for the accelerated master's program. Started as a sophomore in the undergrad. I don't think they let them do that anymore that young. But ended up living in Israel, then being a pastor, college and career and youth pastor. Then ended up at Rosemead School of Psychology because Wheaton didn't have anything open at the time. Leading groups down to Honduras. Was a therapist for pastors after Rosemead and missionaries and adult survivors of sexual abuse for years, and that was years of doing practice as a therapist. Then a professor at CIU, and then God blessed me the opportunity to be at the helm at Mission Training International. We have a great team there. It's doing a phenomenal job. As is the case, you find other Wheaties and you want to go into practice together. When I was at CIU, going to have a private practice, I ran into a Wheatie who, of course, was a physician. He's a proctologist, psychologist, and proctologist. You should have heard the nights we were thinking about what we would put on our sign. Dr. Sweatman and Dr. Smith, analysis and anal cysts, nuts and butts, no, freaks and cheeks, loons and moons. We settled on odds and ends. I'm kidding. We never did that. I never met another proctologist that I went into practice with. The topic for today, trends in gospel-driven global engagement. How Christians in psychology can shape the next generation. I am excited to talk about this. Little context of me. This is my family. I was hoping Luke could come out, but he's playing his trumpet and some musical things going on at school. I would love him to see Wheaton. But the family's grown up, 16 down to 9, 2 boys, 2 girls, and that's the woman that broke up with me on those steps. We got back together 5 years later. This is where I work. I thought I'd attract you to it in case some of you graduate students want to come there or work there someday. This is Mission Training International out in Palmer Lake, Colorado. What do I do? What do we do there? We stand at the crossroads of 150 different agencies. We're training somewhere between, depending on how you count, 1,300 to 1,600 people a year, and debriefing them when they come back. And so just a few pictures to give you a sense of how the groups come in. I just wanted to show you 9 different groups. We have about 30 different communities come in and live in residence for anywhere from 1 week to 5 weeks. They're there right before they leave for the field for long-term service, or they're coming back after they've served for 3 to 4 years. What are some of the trends in gospel-driven global engagement. I want to go through 3 segments, 3 driving questions. Now for you, it's one afternoon. For me, it's been a lifetime of 3 questions. And I'm still open-ended on all of this. I'm still trying to figure this out. But one of the questions that I've had is, what is the core identity of North Americans that cross cultures for the sake of Christ? Scripture tells us that our motives are never 100% pure. What are some of those identities that are not God-given motives, pure motives? And what are the ones that are pure as gold? Another question is, how can we, as Christians in the field of human dynamics, sociologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, how can we get involved in the world of those that, for the sake of the Great Commission, are crossing this stressful divide called cultures and going to another culture? And then third, I want to talk about, there's some things I see going on in the world that fit a certain symptom cluster that we would find in our field. And therefore, I think there's a way for us to attend to it. Been asking these questions internally for quite a long time. So let me talk about some of the trends first. Who said it? This will be a century that will offer unprecedented opportunities for global engagement. Any guesses? Dr. Phil Ryken. Met with Phil this afternoon and told him the excitement I had for what he's brought in the community of grace, his walkabouts, and this reality of what I'm seeing, that things are changing dramatically in the world. And I don't think the average North American is clued into it. The first trend that I'd like to talk about is this trend of the globalization of Christianity and the decentralization of Christianity. These are some of the books that I've read. There's many others out there. And then the statistics are telling us that the global face has changed of the world. 25% now of evangelical Pentecostal Christians live in the U.S. or Europe. North America, Canada, and Europe. Only 25%. That's it. If we do round numbers, we're talking 200 million. 800 million evangelicals live in Africa and Asia and South America. The center of Christianity has changed. All the time since I left Wheaton, I've just been amazed that you kept hearing this, but I didn't know it's to the point where Westerners only make up now 25%. What are the implications for us that are leaving from North America? Those in the field of intercultural studies will tell you that it's unbelievable how ethnocentric any culture is. But when you don't realize that the center of Christianity has changed, and you have someone going from North America, things start to change in the way that the rest of the world receives you. It's very interesting what's going on there. Next trend. Today's missions force has changed. Look how steep this curve is here. This is an amazingly steep curve. This is the generation that we're in right now, these 10 years, as we look ahead to the reality that those that are crossing cultures for the sake of Christ are now more coming from non-Western societies. It's a pretty amazing thing. This is why I've been spending a lot of time trying to say, how can we collaborate so that you guys don't have to learn the lessons that took us 50 or 60 years to learn. So I've been down in Argentina and Chile and Puerto Rico and some other places just trying to say, I will tell you, I will start with the things that we've been making mistakes in. And I tell you, when you come in as a collaborator rather than up and down, it's amazing what God is doing. Another trend that I think is going to impact you a little bit more as you think about North Americans, those leaving from Wheaton, those leaving from different parts across the U.S. This is what we're seeing at MTI. Traditional missions has stayed flat to slightly declining, meaning those that are involved in church planning, traditional church planning endeavors, helping pastors, theological education, or church planning. They have plateaued or decreased. What we've seen in significant increase is 4 different groups. One of those groups, BAM, they call it, business as mission. Some don't like that term anymore, business for transformation, whatever you want to call it. But people are wanting to go open a business that gives people dignity and worth. I'm not here talking about microenterprise, that would fall more under development. This is that wanting to open a business that would be helpful and give people dignity and worth. I'm not going to make, because there's positive and negatives in some of these trends that are going on, but I just want to tell you that this is one in which it's getting a lot of writing, but we see the trend increasing. I think just recently we had a guy come through and he's going to Chiang Mai to open up a Mac store and wants it all be run by the Thai there. Next is the next wave that we see is this wave of relief. The Compassion, Samaritan Purses, World Visions, you name it, are very much involved in relief. What has gone on in Haiti, the tsunami, we all know it. It's a beautiful thing. God's favorite place to meet people is in the middle of their need, in their pain. So we're seeing a lot of relief workers coming through. We're seeing a lot of community development. This is a big one, really big one. More holistic. Let's keep the coupling of proclamation and demonstration. And the creativity here is just blowing me out of the water. The combination of tilapia fish farms and some other things that biologists are helping us think, what's the whole ecosystem of this valley? And what could be best done in this valley for the name of Christ? To be able to talk about the gospel. And so we find a lot of people now going out from traditional agencies, but with these non-traditional vocations. Last but not least is this one, social justice. Can someone give me just an example of a person you know going overseas? That you don't have to give their name, just, I know of someone who's going this place to do, that would be an example of one of these things. Do you see these trends?
Yeah.
I think I can see most. Okay, so I see yes. Give an example. Give me an example. Tell me what's going on at Wheaton. What are some of the hunger interns doing?
Three Wheaton grads who were roommates several years ago are in Indonesia doing business as mission. They have a touring company, and actually one of the guys on the team is now heading up for navigators that whole area as they're delving into that in a much more intentional way.
Here, this is not the first I've heard of it. A tourism business. Absolutely. Someone else?
A grad who is now finished her law degree and being the advocate for women and families in the Middle East.
Advocacy, law advocacy, social advocacy, using the degree of law. The variety is beautiful. God is using every means to be able to spread the gospel. Is there any potential downfalls? First of all, I think we've got to grapple. Our staff went to grappling about this once, and we're like, what do we feel about this? What are we thinking about? I wish you could have been a fly on the wall. Like, well, you know, if we feed them and they go to hell still, what was good was feeding them. And you heard some of these traditional proclamation, demonstration, taste great, less filling kind of conversation. And I still remember our CFO going, all I'm thinking is that these things are the things we neglected in the missions movement in North America in the beginning, and that we're actually adding God's favorite people. His favorite people are the fatherless, the widow, the brokenhearted, the poor. And you could have heard a pin drop, because everybody then just said, no, this is the father heart of God. This is where God meets me also. This is a beautiful thing. I have a good friend, his name's Scott Todd. He works with Compassion. He started a spinoff for all the Christian relief and development organizations to try to attend to the issue of abject poverty. I want to show a clip from a trailer of his just to give you an idea. Get inside the mind of this generation and what compels us, if you would.
You remember that massive number that I gave you earlier, the number of people living in extreme poverty, 1.4 billion? Well, listen to this. I mean, if you're only going to remember one set of numbers from all this stuff I'm telling you, remember this. 52 to 26 and 26 to go. In 1981, 52% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty. Today, that number is 26%. We've cut the percentage of people living in extreme poverty in half, and we did it in a generation. If that's what the generation before ours did, just imagine what our generation can do. There are 138 million Christians in America who attend church regularly and say their faith is very important to them. Collectively, we earn $2.5 trillion per year. We would be the 7th richest country in the world. If we were a country, we'd have a seat at the G8. God has given us amazing wealth and influence. Question is, what are we going to do with it? What could we do with it? You know, in Isaiah 58, we find God's people. They are they're begging to receive blessings from the Lord. But they're exploiting their workers, and they're fighting with each other. They're bickering, and they're complaining that their sacrifices haven't been noticed by God, and that their fasting has been overlooked. But Isaiah, the prophet, he steps into that and he says, you want God to honor your sacrifices? Well, this is what you need to do. It's time to loose the chains of injustice. It's time to set the oppressed free. I believe the message of Isaiah 58 is the same message that we need to hear again today. No more idle words. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God. It's time for authentic action. Let's stop performing out of religious habits and start living the life we were called to. The poor will not always be with us. We do not need to live in a world where children die from preventable diseases. Extreme poverty and all the suffering it brings can be pushed into the history books. And God has given us the mandate and every resource that we need to accomplish that task. He has entrusted us with money, with knowledge, with influence, and with a brief amount of time on this earth, a brief amount of time in which to make a difference. Ending extreme poverty is our generation's greatest opportunity to join the ranks of those who fought for the end of the slave trade, to stand with those who worked for equal rights in the generations before ours. And we are asking you to join this march. Not because you need to, not from duty, not out of guilt, not with any reluctance, but because you want to, because you were made for this.
I wanted to give you a soundbite of this trend of what's going on in this generation. I think in my generation, when I was here at Wheaton, we saw a group called World Christian Fellowship start with about 40 people, and by the time I left, we were at, 800 to 1,200, somewhere voluntarily on Sunday night, wanting to be involved in missions. If that was a wave of God for missions, this is a tsunami. Something's going on in North America with this generation of Christians wanting to make a difference in the globe, in the world, outside of North America. Something's going on with this wave. And I want us to think a little bit with a little bit of psychological, missiological reflection to ask a few questions as we move into this. Now, notoriously, psychologists and counselors, therapists, mental health individuals have been known to be, how do I say this, the kidneys and the liver. I used to be at a university, and one guy, I called him kidney, he called me liver, because we would try to screen out all the toxins of the systems of that university. As therapists, we've been known throughout the years to just look at psychopathology, not to be able to look at all the dynamics related to relational strengths. And some things are going on in the field of psychology that I think are beautiful, positive psychology, some other things that are going on. But it's, I think, wise at this point for us to ask the question, what have we learned during the first wave with those that went? So I think if you are deciding this is a wave, and maybe that's why you're here today because of the topic, this is a wave that I would like to be involved with, then my question to you is, let's start with your target audience. Let's learn what we've learned in the last 20 or 30 years. If there was one quote that's captured me throughout the years after I left Wheaton, it was this one: to be educated is not to have arrived at a destination, it is to travel with a different view. Got a great education here. Been traveling with a little bit of a different view. I'm willing to have that open-ended question for quite a while. And one of those open-ended questions is, what can we learn about these people, all the Wheaties that have gone, all of the others from North America that have gone? What can we learn? Where's the best place to find some of that wisdom? Applying just a couple of basic tools of our trade, and I'm going to go very basic, but these are sometimes when you ruthlessly apply a basic tool, it's amazing what happens. First basic tool, create safety. Do you know what happens, what people really tell you in a therapy office because you've created safety? I tell you the real scoop, what's really going on. Not theory, not abstractions, what's really happening. Another is there's some tools we have in terms of self-awareness. What are the ways for us, a simple Johari window, and we're going to come to this. How do I increase my self-awareness? How do we learn about the North America psyche? And we're going to apply that here today, and I'll talk about the journey that I've been on. So if you've ever been a marital therapist or a family therapist, a teaching therapist as a professor, how do you teach what noise to not pay attention to? What's the lead domino that's going to knock down all of these things? What is the key dynamic going on here? Addressing some real core identity issues. And then last, what's the alternative? What are you going to replace it with? So I'd like to go, and you see in your sheet there, I'd like to go just talking a little bit about this issue of what's the key core identity of those that have gone for the last 25 or 30 years. Can we really get some stereotype or statement that fits the majority of North Americans? Before I do that, I've handed out some, I don't know, what are they, 4x6 cards. I'm going to take a little break now, and I'd like you to do as quickly as you can what you think the core role or identity, this will be a little survey for me, of North Americans is. Now, for those of you that are students or even professors, I need a little AEB. One of the things I learned I saw we have an intern, a Wheaton intern at Phil Haven. I went to Phil Haven for my doctoral internship. The first thing I got quizzed by a psychiatrist was, that's your diagnosis, what's your AEB? I went, what's my AEB? My AEB, I'm supposed to learn what is my AEB? As evidenced by, what's your evidence? What's your evidence? So I would like you to just take a second to write down on that card what you think the core identity, maybe in terms of a role. There are people from North American, I think the core identity would be coach, as evidenced by these symptoms. And once you're done writing some things down, just talk amongst yourselves and tell each other what you put down, if you would. Take a second to do that. Just kidding. All right, shout out a few core identities that you would say might be a term that fits North Americans that have crossed cultures for the sake of Christ. I did this once, and I got someone that was very anti-missions. They said, social misfits. It's not what I'm looking for. What do you think would fit the average person crossing cultures for the sake of Christ last number of years? Any stabs? Expert. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Absolutely. There's a whole bunch in that package, right? Come across as giving something.
Helper.
What's that?
Helper.
Helper. Okay.
Leaders.
Leaders.
Fixers.
Fixers.
Rescuers.
What's that? Empathic. You're Trekkie. Empaths.
Sometimes a bit of a savior mentality that I can change this.
Okay. Savior mentality. The great white hope. Sacrificial. And now we're doing a few evidences and a few identities. Let's take a second to apply just a little bit of a self-awareness tool that all of you are familiar with. I can't help smile, Fran, but every time I look at the Johari window, I smile because Fran and I worked for Africa Inland Mission for so long, and she played Joe and I played Harry. We called it the Johari window. But one of the concepts of the Johari window is growing in self-awareness is I have this public self that I display, but if I want to grow in my self-awareness, that I need to be exposed to the impact that I'm having on others. And it, both positive, but especially the things that might not be so pretty. I remember 2 distinct times in my life where my wife gave me input that kind of, why didn't you tell me that before? One of those times, I think it was when I was around 30, and we were at the dinner table, and I was lost in thought, and she said, Steve, gross, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean, I'm just thinking, I'm looking out the window, we're just being quiet. You know, we got good marriage, we're just thinking. Oh, whatever, okay. So I'm thinking there, and she said, Steve, what are you doing? And I said, Sherry, please. She goes, okay, next time I say freeze, you freeze. So I'm thinking. She says, freeze. You're gumming the hair on the back of your wrist. That is so gross. What are you doing? Are you flossing your teeth? I don't know what this is about. And I the Princess Bride thing and the cry could be heard throughout the land. And I just went, no, because my father is one of these bona fide geniuses, guys. Cardiologist, electrical engineer before that, helped invent the EKG machine. And he would be in church and he'd get a thought and he'd go. And I thought, here's this genius and he looks like a goofball. But here, this is going to be on tape, isn't it? And the reality is that I was doing it. I was starting to do it, and I didn't even know I did it. I didn't know the impact I was having on her. Another time, we both took a marriage seminar course, and she found out in her conflict style, she's a turtle, and I'm stressed, I'm a shark. And so she said, I think I need to practice confronting. I said, okay, why don't you just tell me one thing a day that you think I could grow in? That was a mistake. And the first thing she came out with, maybe it was the second or third, I don't exactly remember, it's a little traumatic, was that she said, I don't know if you know this, but you fold your jeans in the wrong way such that when they go in the closet and then you put them on, there's a dorky pleat that goes down the front. We've been married 14 years, and I'm just learning about the dorky pleat I have in my jeans. There is this beauty I don't have those anymore, thank goodness, but because she told me about my hidden self. There's a part of me that was impacting her. Those are light things, right? Those are behavioral things. But I bet if we listen to other non-North Americans, we'll find out about the North American psyche. The other thing, and this is the gap that I stand in, when you provide a safe place for North Americans that have crossed cultures for the sake of Christ, you say, we're going to debrief you, we're not going to tell anything to your agency with these caveats, you know them, the limits of confidentiality. But when you create that safety, you get told things that are real. Down in Latin America, working with Comey Baum and saying, don't make the same mistake we did. It was our mobilizers and marketers and theologians and those that had never crossed cultures for the sake of Christ that were telling us who to pick and how to do it. We were not learning from those on the field, saying what really is working, what really is happening. Now, there's a reason for that. Us psychologists in those beginning days were people that were just trying to earn some respect in the academic world as true Christians. So we weren't always heard, but we need to be going back. And I'm here to tell you that there are some things that we see as we go forward. The first thing I want to tell you, when in a safe relationship and we are allowing people to disclose what's really going on in their stories as North Americans, and we're debriefing anywhere between 400 to 600 people a year in a safe environment, you hear themes. You find whenever someone crosses cultures for the sake of Christ, they leave one culture, go to another. I believe it doesn't matter what culture you're from. You're going to find both the precious metal and the dross from the discipleship in that model of that culture where they trained them from. I think there's a lot of messages for us to go back, which is why I wanted to meet with Dr. Wheaton today to say there's some things that we're hearing about North Americans that present precious metal and present dross that need to be brought back into the North American discipleship model in church and what is going on. This is precious metal. People that leave North America and cross cultures for the sake of Christ are usually a pretty courageous bunch. Doesn't fit everybody. But the courage is admirable. In the face of fear, this is what courage is. I'm willing to be obedient. I'm willing to name the name of Christ. This is beautiful gold. North Americans are innovative. They're willing to think outside the box. Sometimes they have troubles thinking inside the box, that there might be wisdom in tradition. Oh, wait, I'm going with precious metal. Innovative. Willing to be innovative. Is there a different way for us to think about this? Is there a different way into someone's heart? Is there a different way into this culture, into this community, into this social structure? It's beautiful. Another thing that we're finding is people are driven by their convictions. And when those convictions are the master's voice rather than their own voice, it's beautiful. People are willing to do things. I'm amazed how many people are willing to go to hard places still from North America with some very compelling convictions. What's some of the dross that we hear in that area of growing in self-awareness where we disclose a little bit more? One of the constant statements we hear is, I feel devalued and unnoticed. The average North American is used to tweeting, blogging, Facebooking, others knowing what they are doing and getting kudos for what they are doing. One of the dilemmas with working in another culture is either you're exhausted and don't have time to blog and take all the pictures and videos that post well to YouTube, or you are not recognizing that how much face-to-face people interaction and community meant to you. You were naive to how much that meant to you. And now you're trying to get relationships through a coffee straw. It just doesn't work. We've needed more than some of the social networking sites that we've had. And when people go overseas, they feel alone. North Americans more than anybody else feel alone, unnoticed, devalued. Another thing we're hearing as we debrief people is, I don't feel like I accomplished all that much, and I didn't set out that I set out to do. Start to dig into some of this, and you start seeing the gods of efficiency, utilitarianism, productivity kind of are clear idols in North America. Accomplish. And usually that accomplishment is something programmatic or very behavioral. So you don't hear people saying, I didn't accomplish good relationships. You hear them saying, I didn't accomplish some of these other things that I set up to do. Another common theme that we see as therapists all the time is I'm a crispy critter. I'm burnout. The joy of the Lord is not my strength. Can look like depression. It's traditional overwork. I still remember one of my first clients saying, I didn't realize it till now, and I can name it, but I wasn't going to be satisfied until all 135 million Sudanese had come to know Christ. You know, it's ridiculous, right? But he was never going to stop. It was, I got to work, and I work hard, and I have a strong work ethic, and productivity and efficiency is there. If you're getting confused, this is what I've been for 20-some years, trying to say, how do you put all these together? What's the core identity? What is this core identity? Is there an identity, I could say, that fits all of these symptoms? A gentleman by the name of Steve Saint, you probably know him. Nate Saint's son has put out a bunch of books, The Great Omission, and he put out a video series called Mission's Dilemma. Phenomenal. I'm going to show you 5 or 6 clips now from it. Now to say, Steve's the kind of person that, because of who he is, he earns a safety in the eyes of people from other nations. Because he's lived down in South America in the jungles. Because he knows our culture. And so he creates a safety, and then people tell what they really think about North Americans. And this is the stuff I've heard for 25 years when people are safe. I want you to listen now to some things that we've learned from others.
Me. First, I want to introduce you to a pastor in Nairobi, Kenya. This is a man who is a leader of a large congregation over there, who was one of the speakers at the Urbana conference. In fact, he was a plenary speaker, and then later he was kind enough to give me an interview. I think that you're going to get a lot out of some of the points that he makes about missions. This is Oscar Murillo.
You have an amazing capacity to resolve problems. Now, it's a great thing about Americans, the ability to innovate and to resolve problems. The downside of that is that when you come to our context, you don't know how to live with our problems. You see our poverty, you see our need, you see the places we're hurting, and you have a great compassion to come and solve us. But life can't be solved that way. And many a times, well-intentioned Americans will come into our context, and they're trying to fix my life. You can't fix my life. What I need is a brother who comes and gives me a shoulder to cry on, gives me space to express my pain, but doesn't try and fix me. And when Jesus comes into the world, he doesn't try and fix all the poverty, all the sickness, all the need, the political situation. He allows that to be, but he speaks grace and he speaks salvation and redemption within that context, because there is a greater hope than this life itself. Now, this tendency to fix it has become a real issue, so that some of the reserve we feel as Africans or as two-third worlders is so many people have come to fix us that, oh Lord, please don't bring another person to fix us. We've been fixed so many times, we're a real mess now. Please allow us to be us. Allow us to find God and to find faith in the reality of our need. Now, yes, we do have to address medical problems and those sorts of things, but allow us room to be able to come before the Lord and to find space. Walk with us. Hear our pain before you even begin to fix us.
I'm going to show a bunch of clips. But do you see this need to fix that turns the person into a problem? Another clip.
If I can change, or I could change one thing about the North American attitude to missions, it would be the paternalistic relationship that has been developed and has been entrenched in the receiving country. I strongly believe that that North Americans have done a great work in planting the church and has supported, especially financially and so on, and development of leaders in our country. But there seemed to be a lingering desire of needing to be needed. And so the child seemed never to be fully able to act independently without endorsing or waiting for the acknowledgement of the parent. I mean, that is our missionary forefathers. I would really love to change that so that we would see our relationship as one of interdependence. The child has grown up, he's now independent in some ways, but still interdependent because he's a part of the family. This is what I would like to see, and I think that this would serve to benefit in a mutual way the North American church and the Caribbean church.
In Italy, we have to learn to walk on our own feet. We do not have to depend on mama, 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 mama. Do you understand what I mean? Otherwise, we become like a mama, 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 depending always on the Americans. We have to learn to walk on our own.
Read between the lines, synthesize it. You paternalistically create dependence, a need to be needed. Am I trying to bring to you just what happens with one or two? I'm trying to tell you what I've been seeing for a long time. It's not pretty to look at some of these things when we're held up a mirror. It says, I want you to look at this. The average person is going from North America saying, I'm here to give you poor people something that you don't have. Some more short clips.
Another don't would be not to serve the people like you are special and they are different from you. And that can be communicated in different ways, like the way you live when you're among them, the way you travel when you're with them, or even the way you dress, the kind of food you eat. Communicating a message that you are the special one and they're different from you. But there's a way you can come to their level, even in the home, that you can eat what they eat or communicate that love by the way you deal with them, the touching them, the spending time with them, and living among them in such a way that their problems become your problems. There's a shared community there.
That one kind of hurt. Your special word, different.
Of the way Western missions is done that needs to change is that I believe that messengers bringing the gospel need to bring it in a way that empowers the local people to discover for themselves what it means to be followers of Jesus among their own people. Rather than seeking to give them the answers of what it means, rather than seeking to discern for them how they should or shouldn't live, or what aspects of their culture are biblically sound and which ones are not. Allow them to discern that for themselves. And allow them even to make mistakes. Allow them to learn from their mistakes. Better to allow them to make their own mistakes than for us to impose upon them our mistakes.
Unintended consequence, disempowering.
And then the third thing, Steve, is that sometimes when you come from a dominant culture, and American culture is strong. It's gone around the world. Their music, their ideas, their books dominate almost every culture they come across. When you come from a dominant culture, you may not realize that other parts of the world and other cultures have answers to some of the need and some of the things that we see. And when you come with a dominant culture and you know what you need to do, you don't realize that actually by speaking out, you have denied an opportunity for many varied, different cultural perspectives to be laid on the table and for an answer to be crafted from these different contributions coming from different cultures. And the conversation is dominated by just one perspective. I say to Americans in my context when, say they come and attend a meeting with me, say with pastors, I tell them, don't talk. I need you to go into that place and to listen and to learn. And if anybody asks you a question, your response should be, wow, what conversations these are. I'm just so honored to be here. And don't tell them what you think. Because when the American speaks, coming from a dominant culture, when the American speaks, the conversation is over. Nobody else can contribute. Because the most powerful person in the room has given their opinion. Who would dare to challenge that? And so you never get to hear what the other opinions are. Allow this conversation to begin and end 2 or 3 times over before at the 4th meeting you share your ideas. Then you have all these contributions and you can, craft an answer out of the mosaic of perspectives.
Great advice, but do you hear the statement? You unwittingly dominate. It doesn't mean that we intend to, but I know this. If you get a lawyer on the board of a ministry and the lawyer speaks, people listen at a different level. They say, our risk is this and we need to do this. This dominant culture, it does shut down conversation. We dominate at times. This is one from the tribe that Steve grew up in. So I say come, but don't bring your help in your hand. Come praying for us with your heart. This echoed what I've heard from others throughout the years. You come with an agenda and you don't pray with us. I can't tell you, I was meeting with someone from Liberia recently, and he was saying, I noticed that those that came from North America, even in community development, these are true not just the traditional church planning endeavors that we've had. This is now true of all the ones we talked about, social justice, community development, business as mission, that when you come, he was saying, when we had a problem, we would call you as one of the elders. When you had a problem, you only called the other North Americans to pray for you. It really says something when you think who's got the most effective prayers.
One of the things we have
this is it.
inadequately factored into our models of missions in the last 100 years is what Jesus says in Matthew 16 and constantly tells his disciples, I will leave you one day. There is a succession plan, guys. Wake up because I'm here for only a short while. We have not factored this in where Jesus did. We have not factored it in where Paul did. And Paul always entered a situation with a sell by date, recognizing I am not here for long. And so guys, take the reins from the very beginning and be at the helm, because in 2 weeks, in 1 year, in 2 years, I will be leaving and you must continue. You are the leaders. That's not been the case. And sometimes the fear of even business as ministry is that you will never leave, especially if it works. If it doesn't work, yes, maybe. But if it works, this thing will grow into the huge organizations that Americans are able to leave, and you will never leave.
Whew. We fear you'll never leave. I love the sell-by-date comment there. So we're getting information from others, from those that really tell their safe story, and some that we would add here. You want to fix us. You're paternalistic, create dependence. You're special. We're different. And you come to give, not to join us and learn from us. If you are overwhelmed, my wife said, that slide, when I edited it, it's so overwhelming. There's so much up there. Well, good. That's what I've been living. And actually, I'm glad I didn't come last year to be able to talk, because this year, I got to tell you, some amazing things happened while I was swimming in this. Saying, what is the, if you're a marital therapist, again, you're kind of like, what is the issue here? What what am I taking this? I don't want to swing at shadows. I want to figure out what the real issue here is. Ben says it well. Just a little clip.
The largest barriers we have is that we're such a cold, kind of task-oriented culture that we really don't want to spend the time to build a relationship. We want to just fly in, kind of organize ourselves, erect a building, and save a few souls, and then get on the plane and come home, and then make a T-shirt about it. You know, we just live in a culture of drive-throughs and instant mac and cheese, to where we really don't want to invest in people as much as we want to accomplish a task. And I think changing that paradigm is not going to be a short-term thing.
I'm at a conference, and this is where it started. The most unique conference of my life wasn't Cape Town, 2010. It was going to this conference in Chicago called Engage. And they invited world leaders in, 7 world leaders, Christian world leaders, to say what was going on in their area of the world. And they were going to tell us how North Americans could get involved and what their real thoughts about North Americans were. How do you like that for a conference? I loved it. I just loved the tenor of the whole thing. This was their job. And at one of the breakout sessions, one of the gentlemen said, I don't think you as North Americans realize that you are the leaders of the industrial enlightenment era that exists today. And that when you trace the genesis of almost every organization, it's not a group of people got together and prayed and the Lord led. This is strategic, rational, good thing to do. And in the industrial era, what went on is you said, well, we just need to name the parts, put them in the right order, and then have a good leader tell us what to do, and then something will come out the other end that is better than what we've had before. And they call themselves Sailing Friends. And I thought this was an interesting group. This group says North Americans are powerboats, but we're sailing friends. We move by the winds of the Spirit, but sometimes others are moving by just, if you put enough gas in it, you can just plow right through it. You can figure out a way to make it happen. So I'm at this conference, and 2 of the guys are talking. And one of the North Americans gets up and he says, leadership. And I see this guy roll his eyes. He goes, and I caught him. You know, those MMEs, micro momentary expressions that tell the real true feelings. And he rolls his eyes, and I went, what's that about? I won't say his name. I said, what are you rolling your eyes? He goes, I think you guys have a synonym in North America. Discipleship is equal to leadership development. That you've bought into, that everything rises and falls on this issue of leadership. And I got defensive. Because what? I've bought into this for years. Well, what's wrong with leaders? You need to be a person of influence. I teach my kids about being a person of influence. And he just goes, you don't get it. That's okay. You'll still play a role in the kingdom. So he gave me a challenge. He said, I would like you to just take 1 week, and everything in your library or comes across your desk related to leadership, just note what it was. And I'm like, it doesn't come across my desk that often. Had to end on that one, didn't I? Bring it home right to the building we're in. Isn't that amazing? I'm starting to see. The glasses are coming off my eyes. We are obsessed with leadership. We're obsessed with it. We don't have time to do this, but let me just ask the question to the group. Where in Scripture do you see God saying, aspire to or have the identity of a leader? Not leadership is wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying leaders have influence on a community. That they don't. They do. I'm saying, where in Scripture do you see God saying, I want you to aspire to or have the identity of a leader? There's a couple places that might be.
Something about the role of like older women or titles in the past.
Okay, so I want the elders to teach the youngers, the men to teach the women. We hear, do you hear our hearing? Sociologically, we hear influence as leadership. And then we use that word. But you're on to something there. What about you, Jerry? Where do you see it in Scripture? Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
In Hebrews, I would that you'd all be teachers, but now I have to relay these basic tenets again that you haven't responded to. Breaks into Hebrews.
And I missed the very beginning statement, which is going to be key for me.
He said, I would that you would all be teachers, but we have to relay again the foundations of repentance.
Okay, Paul's saying, I wish that you will all be like I am and be teachers. And then there's another place in Paul's writing that talks about if anyone desires to be an overseer, he desires a noble task. Is overseer leader, or is it administrator? What do we mean by leader? And there's two indications there that it's noble. You see the lists of gifts and leadership at one of the points, and when it's translated in one translation is in the middle of the gifts. What I'm suggesting is what's very new to me and extremely convicting is that it becomes more, we get more airtime for leadership. And it becomes this unwitting synonym for discipleship. And when I start to look at a bunch of those symptom clusters, what I'm seeing is that this is individuals whose core identity is as a leader. And their value is making something happen and being of influence. This clip.
I think when the Lord leads us to go into a new place, it's first of all, the attitude of going there is to be a servant. And many people use the word servant leader, but I don't see that term in the Scripture anywhere because the Lord just said to be a servant.
We can get I did for quite a few months, got my hackles up and my defenses up. It's about leadership. No, there's nothing wrong with that. And this little clip drew me back to, wait, what does God say to those that want to make a difference for him? Surely he doesn't have a trouble with us wanting to have influence on his world. How does this relate to you as Christian psychologists going to be involved? If you don't address these core identity issues, it goes wrong, there's more pain. So one of the things that I had fun looking at was Jesus with his disciples. Jesus, who's your greatest? Who's the greatest? And I thought that for some reason that was one conversation in the New Testament. But the more I looked at it, it was very amazing to me that this conversation had 5 distinct times. The first is they're on the road to Capernaum and they start arguing amongst themselves. And then God says, wait, I heard you arguing. What were you arguing about? The next is then in Capernaum, and he takes a chance to be proactive and teach them. The next is on the way to Jerusalem, and they pull this fast one where the mother of James and John goes and asks Jesus. They can sit on his right and left. Talk about asking your mother to go ask for you because you're afraid yourself. And then he teaches them in Jerusalem. And then, last but not least, they're not getting it. Right? I didn't even see this as much, but the Last Supper, he says, one of you is going to betray me. And they do the, is it I? But right afterwards, a dispute rose out among them. I want you to listen to these passages. It'll take about 2 minutes. That's it. Just listen to these passages.
They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the road?" But they kept quiet, because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all." He took a little child whom he'd placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. "What is it you want?" he asked. She said, "Grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the 2 brothers. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, so you must be careful to do everything they tell you, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. But the hand of him who is going to betray me is with mine on the table. The Son of Man will go as it has been decreed, but woe to that man who betrays him." They began to question among themselves which of them it might be who would do this. A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was considered to be greatest. Jesus said to them, "The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who's at the table? but I am among you as one who serves.
I'm going to have to put this into hyperdrive. If we don't learn as North Americans to cross cultures for the sake of Christ as servants, I believe the rest of the world will be saying, no, thank you. We don't want you on the stage. Those symptoms we looked at, all of those are symptoms of a leader when they're not leading well. You look at the best leaders in the Old Testament, David, Solomon, and when they talk to God, and this is what was convicting for me, it threw me back into Scripture. Could this be true? Our core identity needs to be as servants. What I have found that we don't realize we're doing it, and you as psychologists would know this better than anybody else, when you dangle leadership out in front of somebody else, you are dangling something in front of people whose psyche and insecurities are there. And what they see is that I can get accolades and be a good Christian. I can get advantage and I can get authority or control. I like that kind of discipleship if I can get those things. But when you dangle servanthood like Christ did, it's very different. You are asking for tests of, are you willing to be inconspicuous? North Americans do not know how to be inconspicuous. Most servants, they did their best job when they're not seen or heard. Are you willing to have low control? You're working at someone else's bidding on their timetables. It's not always on your timetable. And as a friend of mine said, it's low advantage. You don't really know you're a servant until you're treated like one. I'm not sure. Are North Americans willing to go overseas with the kind of identity that we see throughout Scripture and that God calls us to? Not as leaders, but as servants at core. I believe if you're going to get involved in this game of global engagement, you need to be finding and confronting and help people honing their servant attitude. That's really what's inside, is a true servant. You find a lot of leaders now at ministries. They're there for a year or two and then gone. Sometimes because they're not getting those accolades. They don't feel like they have the control. They don't have the advantage. And often those that stick it out are those that are servants. It's not always that simple, I understand. But we need servants. Two things I want to go forward with. You see some bullets there, and I want to talk about them just very quick, and then we'll end. There are many beautiful historic roles. I hope you, as the psychology department here at Wheaton, and those in the listening of this that are mental health specialists, that you get involved in this next wave of what God's doing, because it's beautiful. The historic roles have pretty much been in the area of clinical interventions, therapeutic interventions when things go wrong. There's been some other historic roles like assessments. But that's been the majority of it. There are some promising new roles that are happening and that are going around the globe right now. This was the old mindset, is we were hearing plop, plop, plop. People were, you needed to triage and build a hospital at the bottom of the cliff. Because the systems and the people going overseas, you just could barely keep up with the bleeders. Things have started to change to where we're saying we can get involved in preventative endeavors and build a fence at the top of the cliff. To use an analogy, I'll let you run with it. The whole field of community psychology offers so much to us in the way of borrowing from a field of psychology. And just good news to all you clinicians that are in my hearing. You don't need to become and get credentialed in community psychology to have an impact in programs and endeavors that can do it. Let me just break it down for you. Sorry, but I'm a simpleton at times. You need to find an at-risk population. You need to say, what's the symptom clusters or disorders of that population? And then what could we do that would ameliorate, eliminate those symptoms clusters if we did it. I grew up as the only white kid in all African American neighborhood in San Francisco. My kid, I still remember my parents tell me when I was in kindergarten, they asked who the brightest kid in class was. I said I was, because Jose, he's Mexican, the rest are all black. And I thought bright was skin color, not anything else. And the reality is I was helped. I was mugged like every other day. I was helped by the Big Brother program. Great community psychology program. It was phenomenal. It was so helpful to me because Dad was in medical school. Mom was making some income. We were living, I don't know, something really abysmal. But here's what's going on in the field of missions, sharpening your interpersonal skills workshops. Hardest part of missions, getting along with other missionaries or other North Americans, as the terms have changed. So let's teach them about interpersonal skills. Mission Training International, where I work, the whole thing could be considered a community psychology program. Stress, grief, conflict, loss, dealing with some of these issues ahead of time. Women of the Harvest, another great group. About every other month, there's women that are involved in cross-cultural missions that are meeting together to be able to support one another. Those that are on the edge of burnout, that are needing to be able to get themselves refreshed. Refresh program with Heartstream. We're talking at lunch today, the critical entry point of when TCKs are starting their college experience. This Barnabas has been doing MK reentry retreats. The third thing I would like to tell you is we've always had this focal point. It's those crossing cultures for the sake of Christ. But we have not considered, what about us as mental health specialists getting involved in doing actual therapy, community development, community counseling centers overseas? In the last 2 or 3 years, a group out of Lausanne Congress on World Evangelization is where they really got their thrust recently, called Care and Counsel as Mission. And I brought some papers about that. But what about you going and doing it? We've always been reticent because how do we take those social cues from another culture and read them correctly? But there's some answers to that. People have been doing some work in that area. Why not take what you're doing and look at what we've learned in dual diagnosis and substance abuse. Let's go to Latvia, where it's off the charts, the amount of addictions that are going on there, and offer what we think is transcultural. So, you faculty members, go to Brazil, go wherever, get involved. It's just terrific. I encourage you to just really get involved in this way. It will light up parts of your soul that you didn't even know existed. Back to the basics. To end my comments, I want to just make a few comments here. These are opinions. They're my opinions. I believe North Americans have been good about talking about the Great Commission, but not necessarily in light of the Great Commandment. I love these books, Crazy Love and what's Platt's book? Radical. A lot of it is what we need to be doing, but not how we need to be doing it. The how is found in the Great Commandment. Go make disciples, teaching them to obey. I'm looking for a book here, and I don't see it, but that's okay. The whole Cape Town commitment ends with this conclusion. Go make disciples, love one another. That's the conclusion of the Cape Town commitment. The 4,000 world leaders that gathered together in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm just thinking that we in the field of mental health very much know about this relational love one for another. I believe in reality that societally speaking, in the history and time that we're in, we are the keepers of discipleship. While others have been talking about proclamation, demonstration, we're going, you know what? Your inner kingdom is being neglected. you know what? Your most significant relationships are being neglected. Why is this rise of the field of psychology such that you're the number 1 or 2 program in all of Wheaton and at many other schools? I believe because God's church will continue to call people to influence and disciple our inner worlds and our most significant relationships. So I've been walking around, whether I'm in this city or that town, and asking myself this question. What insights do we have as a group of now international, not just North American, international disciple keepers? People that have an eyeball on people's inner kingdom and their key relationships. And I've been asking myself, what relationships are going to have the biggest witness for the sake of Christ, the biggest discipleship possibility? And here's what I found. The world shows every symptom of father absence. Somebody go research this. Please go research this. I am not talking just about nuclear family, nor am I talking about gender fathering, meaning just males. I'm talking about the role of protecting and providing and giving emotional presence. When you see in the nuclear family father absence, you see these symptom clusters: chaotic structures, sexual acting out, violent acting out, poverty, and arrested development. You can fit almost all of the symptoms of father absence under those things. I'm going around the world, I'm at Cape Town, and what I am seeing is everybody focusing on the symptoms. And I just want to introduce to you today just a thought for maybe one of you to run with, maybe more than one of you to run with. As we send people out and as we encourage Latins, Africans, Asians that are going overseas for the sake of Christ, as we encourage the church body, I think we've given up on fathers in businesses, fathers in governments, fathers in communities, and fathers in families, meaning people that, again, not about gender, that protect, that provide, and that give presence. The most, I cried. I'm a crier. I didn't used to be, but I'm a crier. I am at Luzon Congress, and I'm hearing about slavery. I'm hearing about poverty. I'm hearing about human sex trafficking. And I'm going back to my room, and I'm crying. And I will never forget at Luzon, where I had this mixture of emotion, and they talked about one of the first bonded slave holders in India being brought to justice, and the place eroded in clapping. And I looked around at a gentleman who's involved in men's ministry, and he's crying. And then I started crying because I knew right away. Not just the way we've thought of men, the way we've thought of those fathers or men included that are in government, in communities, in businesses, in families. We've essentially said, we've given up on them. They're the perpetrators. I'm putting my finger on something that I think is kind of scary, and that is we're left to a world of going after symptoms, not after causes, not after discipling. What does it mean to have good relationships in communities, to be a true father in business, in families, in schools? Something for you to consider. You've been very kind on an afternoon in a dark room. I think only 3 of you fell asleep. Thank you. Thanks for your time. It's good to be with you. I know it's been a bit of a fire hydrant, but I want to leave you with this. Please, please, this is a new day here and in many places. Get involved. As psychologists, you have so much to offer. You don't even know it. But be willing also to speak truth back into the other parts of this institution and other places. Go after the motives of individuals and their identity. Get overseas. be thinking, what would you answer that question? Where's it going to have the greatest impact? Thanks for letting me be with you. Look forward to seeing some of you throughout today and tomorrow. Shalom.